The following is brought to you by the Starfleet Podcast Network, SPN, The Spin.
Hey, this is Dag, and you're listening to Beyond Trek Podcast.
So it really is a big team effort. They are keen on getting the science as right as possible. And they know how many people are inspired by Star Trek and other science fiction. They want it to be as right as possible. That said, in the end, story will trump science. So if something is impossible, we have to leave it, and maybe then we just don't explain that piece to it.
Red alert.
Give me a little more again about your background, so that way the audience can know more of what you do and your work and how it relates to Star Trek.
Sure. So my name is Mohamed Noor. I'm a biology professor at Duke University, and most relevant for your podcast, I'm also an occasionally contracted science advisor for some of the current Star Trek TV shows. So what that means is, Dr. Erin McDonald is the science advisor for the entire franchise, and her expertise is in astrophysics. But sometimes they need expertise outside of astrophysics or outside of her specialties. So they'll contract for somebody to help with an episode or a season or an arc or something like that. So I'm one of the people who might contribute, for example, in the context of biology. And I've done so in seasons 3 and 4 of Star Trek Discovery, as well as things that have not yet come out in both Prodigy and Strange New Worlds. So, and then beyond that, I'm very interested in science communication and science education. So one of the things I love to do is I love to go and give talks at conventions like this one. I'm at the 57-year mission in Las Vegas right now.
Lucky.
I should show you.
I'm jealous. I am so. I've been sitting here like vibrating in my chair all week because I have been reaching out more on Facebook to some more mutual friends that are involved in Star Trek, so I can kind of build that network and meet new people. So now my timeline is filling up with all of these. On my way to STLV, I can't wait.
Yeah,
I'm here I should have. Why did I do that to myself? Because my FOMO is bad. I've got that fear of missing out is bad for me.
It's a real thing. It's a real thing. Yeah.
Today, I was actually thinking today, I could go ahead and just drive out there and, oh, hi, honey. This is my daughter.
Hello. Nice to meet you.
Hi, you're on the camera in the recording. Yeah, she's got a lot of her daddy in her. Are you having fun? Oh, well, don't do that. Okay, I take it you have children, so I do. Do you want another one here and just kind of just about start
I'm good with
over?
my two, but I appreciate it. You got a wonderful one.
Yeah. Well, my youngest son, he's going to be 6 next weekend, so
I'm gonna be 9.
and she's going to be 9 in November. Yeah, and so I've got a long way to go before I'm done with the whole parenting thing. Yeah.
Well, let me finish what I was saying though earlier.
Sure.
So I like to give talks at conventions like this one about the science in the show. And one way I like to say,
I got to go back to the thing. I got to get back to the talk. Say bye bye.
Bye bye.
You'll come back in a minute. Oh, great. Sorry about that.
All good. No, it's all good. So what I like to do is I like to say it's a Trojan horse that says Star Trek on the outside, but boom, it's science inside. Yeah. So I like to take depictions from shows and use them to be instructive examples about the real underlying scientific principles in there. So I do that both at conventions, but also I have my own YouTube channel too. It's called BioTrekkie Explains. BioTrekkie. So I have like short versions of the talks I give at conventions on that YouTube channel too.
I want to check that out. That sounds like a very educational channel.
It's fun.
And it sounds like with what you're doing, it's helping because Star Trek is supposed to be a depiction of our future. Not so much like Star Wars where it's science fantasy. We've got science fiction with Star Trek, so we're trying to keep it grounded in reality.
Totally.
Have you found that for the most part, the writing and the stories has been close enough, or have you seen these things just said, what are you people doing? There's no way any of this is possible or real. Has there been a lot of correcting that you've had to do?
Great question. So, I mean, one important thing is like, we're not watching National Geographic. We're watching a TV show that has good plot. Good plot will always trump science. And, I understand that. And the answer is never just going to be like, no, we're not going to do that. Because if I just say no, it's still going to happen. And it might happen worse than if I help.
Right.
And credit to the science, credit to the writers that they actually want the science to be right. They're willing to invest money and, find expertise to actually get the science right because they know how many people are inspired to go into science, technology, engineering, and math by the depictions they see on Star Trek and other sci-fi. So just as one example, I got brought in for season 4 on a broader arc that was with season 4 Discovery, a broader arc about species 10C. What they said is we want to have some truly alien aliens, ones that aren't just ones with a forehead prosthetic, one where the universal translator doesn't work. And they said, what kind of communication could they be using? So what I proposed was, I said, why don't you use chemical communication? We don't really think about that because we as humans tend to basically do most of our communication through either audio or visual sorts of things. But lots of animals, ants, dogs, things like that, do a lot of communication through chemicals. So what I proposed there specifically was, why don't we use hydrocarbons as the basis for that? I worked with VFX people for what would these look like. It can't be like overly simple because like if it's just basically something like methane, like no, that's basically a fart. That's not going to work. We need something a little bit more complicated than that. So, and they're all in. They are all in. They're actually excited about the science too. And I loved actually working with, say, Michelle Paradise said that, like, I remember at the end, I heard her giving an explanation of the underlying science. And it was inspiring that, like, her explanation was spot on right. And she clearly is not trained in science, but, you know, she was so interested. She wanted to fully understand. It wasn't just a, like, here, fill in the script and hand it back to me. She wanted to know it. And that, I think, speaks very, very, very well of the folks who are doing this sort of work. And it wasn't just me, to be clear. I mean, this is a collaborative thing with lots of other people involved. I mean, I worked on the physical basis for communication and, you know, what was that looking like? But there were some linguists brought in from METI, the Messaging Extraterrestrial Intelligence Organization, who actually worked out the Linkos language that they used for translating these hydrocarbons into the words we saw on there. So again, it's like different scholars from different disciplines. We have art people who are with their expertise. We have writers with their expertise. A big community thing to bring everybody this final product that I hope people like.
Well, that is amazing. So it sounds like the communication that was done with 10C, basically, I guess what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of the hook or the science part of communication with a species that works completely differently than we do was your idea. That was, I mean, parts of it were.
Yeah, I mean, the chemical communication, the hydrocarbons, what those look like, those pieces were mine. The fact that there was this sort of alien communication, that was not mine. They had already decided on that, you know, prior to my even being brought in. But it was nice they brought me in early enough that it could influence the whole thing. It was nice, you know, working with the writer's room for pieces of it, or with the showrunner for pieces of it, and then later with the art director, later with other folks like that. So, I mean, it's really nice in that sense, working over the overall arc. Now, there are times when I've done consults that have been much simpler. They're just like, you know, here's one line of dialogue associated with what's showing up on a medical tricorder. Is this okay? And I'm like, oh no, I should change that one word there, you know, and that might be it sometimes. And that's fair, you know, and
easy
again,
enough.
Credit to them for wanting to do that sort of thing and actually making sure that it's right. Now, to be clear, sometimes people will say, like, you worked on the show, but blah, blah, blah wasn't exactly right. Like, you know, I don't get every piece of everything. and that would be too much to ask, that everybody with every kind of expertise look over everything. That's too much to ask. So, you know, yes. they pick the big things and then they get expertise for it, which is so much better than, I mean, I hate to throw stones at anything, but I like to make fun a little bit of sometimes of some of the CW TV shows, the superhero shows there. Like, they clearly do not employ science advisors on some of the stuff there. I love them. They're fun. They're entertaining. They're engaging. That's what it's for. Again, it's not National Geographic.
Right.
But
yeah.
You clearly Star Trek is going the extra mile. Yes.
You're watching something with a clear plot and a story. National Geographic, you just kind of sit there and hope something cool happens.
Yeah.
So have you experienced any times where it feels like the plot, because I know you said that the plot overrides the science.
Always has to. If they have to go through another dimension that doesn't exist, like, well, they're just going to do it.
Well, right, of course. Have you ever been faced with a challenge of, okay, this is the correct way to do a thing, but the plot dictates to be done a way that's just completely opposite? And I know it's science fiction. We all know that.
Yeah, of course.
But it seems like when they try to tie into something real as a basis, and they get from you that, okay, well, I get what you're trying to do, but this is in no way, shape, or form a thing. Is there any frustration on your end where you feel, listen, it's just, hey, this is how you should do it if you either do it or not?
In fact, I mean, one of the things that comes up all the time too is that they're not giving like a seminar to explain every detail of what's going on. Mm-hmm. So sometimes it's actually better to have something that's oversimplified to the point of maybe even not being precisely right, but it's just easier for people to get. And there's times where, even though I'm a scientist, I'm like, you know what? don't even try to do it exactly the right way. Just say this, because you can't give like a 30-minute explanation for what's going to happen. It has to be just something where there's like a couple of lines of dialogue, and it has to be as simple as possible, because the poor actors, I mean, they don't know all these words, and forcing them to memorize this really long and complicated explanation is too much. So there's been times when actually I've even sacrificed on the science myself without even being asked, and saying like, you know what? Just don't. Let's just say this. This is good enough. It's it would be a B plus instead of an A.
We'll take it, because if
exactly.
Their focus at that point, I think, would just be, can I pronounce this correctly? And
exactly. Can I pronounce it correctly? And it's not crazy. Yeah.
And then hearing it as the audience, we've all got different levels of understanding, and that leads me to a good question, if I may say. How difficult is it to have these things? For example, I work in IT, and when I'm talking to someone, depending on what I glean as your level of understanding and your comfort with technology, I can adjust that level. I can make it, give you some metaphors and analogies that would make it to where
metaphors and analogies are great. Yeah.
And not talking down to anyone. It's just, this is kind of like this, it's the reason it made that sound is like when your lawnmower doesn't have any gas or whatever.
There's a great example of that Dr. Aaron McDonald did in season 3 of Discovery, where she referred to something as a star burp. Just like, oh, okay. Yeah, I get that. I know what a burp is. I know what a star is. I get that. I don't need a technical explanation.
Right. And when you're talking to someone that is another person that's high end that knows all the acronyms and everything else. So how much of a challenge
then is a coronal mass ejection or whatever is fine. Yeah.
Exactly. So how much of a challenge is it to speak to different levels of the audience possible understanding of the science? Do you just try to have an even baseline, or do you kind of mix in the lower level with the highs?
That's a great question. So I personally, the way I think about it, now again, I haven't done like tons of this. I'm just somebody who's contract education, but when I'm conceiving of it, I'm conceiving of it as basically the minimum level of understanding. That basically somebody who has a high school diploma, has taken some science classes, but maybe it's been like 20 years. So like that's who I'm shooting for overall. However, this is an important thing to your question. What I'll do is I will write out a more complicated explanation, sometimes even having citations to actual scientific papers. And I will keep that for myself, just for my own records, as well as sharing it with, say, some of the writers. And the reason for that is then if somebody who is a hyper expert does this, well, actually, blah, 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 there's a response that's ready. Now, the thing is, that's never going to happen in the show. But there's a response ready on like a piece of paper that like, they can say, well, Dr. Mohamed Noor told me that, if you look at this paper from 2007 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, they actually said there was an example of blah, 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 blah. So that's the way I look at it too, that for the show itself, aim for minimal science knowledge. There's some things that we have to assume words like atom, molecule, like we don't go through and define those every time. Again, we assume like high school level of education in science, even if it maybe was many years back. But then beyond that, the expertise stuff, we just keep it on file. And then if somebody writes them, we can respond. Who's really good about that? I don't know if you've seen is, and this is especially true for Trek Canon stuff, Aaron Waltke, who's a co-showrunner for Prodigy. Yes. He actually will respond to people all the time on Twitter when people say, well, blah, 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 blah. He's like, actually, if you look at this, it actually is possible. I mean, not so much in the science realm, but he does that just in general. So that's something I've always admired, his engagement with the fans, even ones who are potentially critical. He's a great guy too. I think he's here at the convention somewhere. I haven't seen him yet, but I think he's
really?
Here.
Well, that's great. I don't know if you follow Reddit or any other message board, but the thing that always makes me laugh is when you get that, well, actually.
Oh my gosh.
And then you're about to hear from someone that is not an authority on the subject anyway, but they're going to correct you because they feel like they just know. Yeah. So.
And again, sometimes it is wrong. I mean, sometimes it was, like I said, the B plus instead of the A plus solution, but it's because, this has to be solved in one line of dialogue. I mean, sometimes you just can't do it in one line dialogue. There's no way to get the A plus solution there. So like, okay, well, this isn't exactly right, but it's close enough that people get the idea and we can move on.
You've got to be able to get the gist of it because these episodes, the way the streaming services work now is you don't have those 26 episode seasons where you can have this stuff all stretched out. You're talking about basically 10-hour movies. So there's not a lot of time to get tripped up in the mundane, really.
Especially about like little random bits of something like, oh, this, let's say, I'll use something that happened in Prodigy last season and in the first season, where they found out that doll was a mixture of a bunch of different species, human, but also a whole bunch of others. I mean, one of the things that was suggested in that was that he was a product of hybrid speciation. I didn't actually get to explain what hybrid speciation was in that discussion, right? So that's something I'm hoping that like the term's there. If someone wants to look it up, it can be there. And there's like a very general explanation. Like, why was this specific speciation and not just a hybrid? I didn't get to explain that. But, I have notes written down for that sort of thing, just as an example.
Right. That's excellent. So here's what I want to hear some more about.
Sure. What
are your hobbies and interests outside of Star Trek?
Oh, there aren't any. No, I'm just kidding.
Crazy question. Like, no, I can't answer that. That's it.
honestly, Star Trek is a lot of it. I mean, I mentioned my own podcast, but honestly, I don't spend a lot of time with that. I'm very active with a couple of other podcasts. The Seventh Rule podcast, which is hosted by Sirach Lofton, Ryan T. Huskin, formerly Aaron Eisenberg before he sadly passed away. I am an associate producer with that. I've been very heavily involved with that. There's some spin-offs from that, like the Virtual TrekCon series, which I know Beyond Trek has been part of the Virtual TrekCon conventions too. So I'm very active with that. Yeah, no, exactly. So they have the main viewers show every Tuesday night at 8:00 p.m. Eastern time. So I'm involved with that. There's another podcast called Watch the First. That's actually one that's not really Star Trek oriented, but Brian T. Husk, who I mentioned before, is basically the main host for that. And that's literally just like watching the first episode of some TV show, and then we have a discussion about it. It's really fun. So we have that comes out. That comes out every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern time.
Well, that adds some variety to it, and it sounds like you're a part of several different podcasts now.
And I'm a Patreon for others too. I'm a Patreon for the Delta Flyers with all them, and Patreon for the Shuttle Pod show. So a lot of Trek ones, especially, but still, I mean, it's just a lot of fun stuff. And then, of course, I have my academic work too.
Yes. Does it ever get old? And you can answer this honestly. Does it ever get old to be asked to do all of these talks and discussions amongst all the different podcasts, groups, fans? And the reason I ask that is because I did a Google search on Star Trek podcasts, just wanted to see where are we all amongst the sea of podcasts. And for Star Trek, it had to be around 200 or more. And I was thinking, oh my God, that's well, the thing is that anyone could wake up some morning and say, I should do a podcast. And I'm going to start with the top 10 episodes of The Next Generation. And the thing is that when you do your podcast, it's not like you're employed. Nobody can tell you, no, you can't do it. So it's just adding so much. So I can only imagine that you're getting requests probably pretty often, but it sounds like it's not something you get burned out on.
Not at all. I mean, what I love is I love people getting excited about science. I love people getting excited about science fiction, including Trek. And if we have the intersection of those two things, oh my God, I'm always in. I mean, one of the things as an educator, so again, I'm a professor. One of the things as an educator I love is basically just getting to chat with people who are excited about some topic and discussing it and dissecting it and thinking about it. I mean, that's so much fun. And if you do it with folks like you who are curious and excited and interested, I mean, that's the best sort of audience you have. It's when you're teaching, say, in a college classroom, if you're teaching a majors class, there's often some people who are kind of like, oh, this is a hoop, I have to jump through it. Honestly, the vast majority of students are not like that, even though it's sometimes a stereotype that's true. The vast majority of students are not like that, but there's a subset. But if it's a podcast, like, why would you listen if you're bored? Right. So 100% of the people listening are really excited about it. They want to hear about this. And I love that. I love just chatting, with you or with other folks and having other people maybe be interested enough to be like, hey, I want to look up something about chemical communication now because I just heard this podcast where somebody was talking about this. I want to look up hybrid speciation. Great, go for it.
Those are a couple things that I knew existed, but didn't dive into like you have. And now you've taught me something and given me a subject that I think I will definitely want to look more into and learn about, because I like science. Science is good. I may not be good at it. I'm probably more of a C+, B- level, but sorry, I've got my director here telling me I'm being too loud, so I guess I gotta,
all good. I didn't hear it.
Yeah, usually it's just me, my green screen, peaceful and quiet, but you caught me when the boss was here because it was late notice. But
speaking of the boss, do you want me to take a quick peek outside so you can see and your folks can see?
Let's see
I'll turn the camera around. I'm actually sitting in a little kind of behind the scenes area. I'm in the vendor room. To be clear where I am, I'm in the vendor room of the 57-year Mission Convention. This is a Star Trek themed mostly convention. So there's a lot of the actors here. There's a lot of vendors here. So I'm going to walk out. I'm going to turn around the camera first so you see the other way. I'm just in a little backstage area. And we're coming out now. This gives you an idea of what the vendor area looks like. So we have various people. Oh, hello. Hello. We have various people selling various sorts of wares all around. This is Melissa Longo from the Seventh Rule. She has a table here, the walking art made by Melissa. There's one of her customers.
Awesome.
But you see she has a whole bunch of like Star Trek themed shirts. These, by the way, you can also order online at theintrovertedrepublic.com.
Let her know Big J with Beyond Trek Podcast says hi.
Big J with Beyond Trek Podcast says hi. Oh, thank you. She's not paying me for that. She's not paying for what I just said.
Oh, okay. Thank you. That $5 was well earned just now.
So I'm selling copies of my book here too. This is my book that I have, which actually teaches science concepts using Star Trek examples. But we have like various other vendors all around. There's some actors around
amazing.
there. Actually, you see Sirach Lofton is straight there wearing the yellow shirt straight ahead right now.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I see him.
There's other folks
awesome.
around. Yeah. We'll see various other vendors all around. But it's nice. Right now, it's actually unusually quiet because this is the Thursday. There's a great cosplay. Is that Anisha?
Oh, that's great cosplay.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
So now you got early
Look at your fans. Oh, sorry.
Now, I think you told me, if I recall correctly, you got early access to set up. Was that right?
Yeah, because since I'm a vendor here, so I can come in a little bit earlier. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Tell us about your book. I didn't realize you had a book that you were working on.
Yeah, sure. Well, like you said, it's called Live Long and Evolve. It's available on any local bookseller. It is basically the introductory non-majors class at Duke for genetics and evolution, but all framed using examples from Star Trek. So it doesn't assume you know any science at all. Again, beyond just like atom, molecule, basic words like that, right? But essentially, I go through all the topics there, like evidence for evolution. I go over what is natural selection. But in each case, I start with an example from a Star Trek episode and then say, okay, this is what we saw. Now let's talk about the real science and then come back to the episode at the end and say like, okay, how good was that for depicting the real science there? And so it's nice because it gives a narrative associated with this. I actually use it for a class at Duke now that literally would show up on your transcript as genetics, evolution, Star Trek, which I love that. But a lot of people who take the class have honestly never seen any Star Trek and their first years coming into college, and they still like it because there's a story. Right? There's a narrative. It's not just memorize the steps of the Krebs cycle. Like, no, nobody likes that. But it's hey, let's watch this cool TV show. Here was some science in it. What was right? Why not? And then let's talk about the real science in it. So for that, actually for the class, which I use the book for, the final project is to come up with some, something creative on your own to teach some of these concepts that you learned in the class. So one guy last time I taught the class did a video of, basically like a fake Star Trek episode.
Oh,
it was only like 5 or 6 minutes long. It was only like 5 or 6 minutes long, but like they encountered these aliens and they're unusually strong. And he was trying to explain it, but it was fascinating. What was great is like there were so many people involved. This was like a production. He himself was not actually even in the video. He basically recruited his whole dorm to contribute to this thing. And what warms my heart about this, not just the effort, not just the project was really cool, but that many other people were exposed to science because it was exciting. It wasn't just this boring, like if I'd just been showing him the Krebs cycle, nobody else would have been involved, right? So
I believe I've heard that name, but I don't remember anything.
Krebs cycle, yeah. I don't either.
Well, so the name of the book again is Live Long and Evolve.
Exactly.
Okay,
yeah, it's available on Amazon or it's from Princeton University Press, but you can find it on their website or on any bookseller.
I'm going to look for that on Audible as well because I love those.
Oh yeah, it's on.
books.
Yeah, actually, I made an audio version of it, but it's not my voice. It's somebody else's voice.
Well, then I don't think I could get it now if it's not your voice.
It's okay. You can still get it.
No, I know you're going to be pretty busy. If we need to start wrapping up, we can do that because you've got some stuff coming up. Last question that I want to ask you. Last question here is. Has there been any talk about you having a small role walk on or something, some kind of on camera? You're a scientist.
I wish
something like that. That's never come up.
I would love to do that someday, but there's no plan at least no plan that I've heard of that involves that. I wish.
Right.
I know, as you know, Dr. Erin McDonald got that in Prodigy in the season 1 finale. So there was basically an animated version of her. But again, she's actually on retainer for the franchise. I'm just somebody who's contracted. So, fair.
I will keep my fingers crossed that you get that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I would love it so much.
But thank you so much.
I'm honestly honored. I'm honored even to have my name show up in the credits occasionally. I mean, that to me is already like they've already given me the moon. I'm happy. I mean, I'll take Jupiter if it comes, but I'm happy with the moon.
I'll take that. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And I'm glad you're able to make some time for us for this today, and really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy STLV, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again really soon.
Hopefully I get to see you at the next one too.
Great. Yes. I'm going to start saving up the nickels now. So hopefully I'll be there.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you.
You take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Right, bye.
We are Beyond Trek Podcast. Lower your inhibitions and surrender your years. We will add inspirational and hilarious Trek content to your day. Your attention will adapt to subscribe to us. Resistance is futile.